Well, England are in another Euro semi-final, Gareth Southgate's third out of four. And you know what? As much as it has been horrific to the soul in watching England play at points, and we have played some absolute terroristic football, we're in a semi-final. We're 2 games away from doing something amazing. I'm going to choose to be the optimist going forward, and I've tried to do it all tournaments so far, but it's been bloody tough. Look, plenty of years from now, when we're telling the story to our kids and our grandkids or whoever, nobody will care how we played at that point. That will not matter. All that will matter is that we won the Euros. So that is the only real important thing I'm going to focus on, is winning, which we have done just about. I'm not saying it's been impressive, but we are winning and getting through. So that's what I'm going to focus on. And I'm going to focus on this game now. We beat Switzerland on penalties. It was a grind. It was 120 minutes, shouting of emotional torment and physical and mental anguish at points. But we got through. Swiss gave as good as they got, and they played a real good game. Ultimately, we got him on penalties, and you have to credit the penalty takers, Saka especially. He deserves all the praise in the world, and look, I know there are people that are getting a bit sick of it, but after what he went through in the last year, is to come back and step up and take his penalty this time. Boy, that takes some guts. That takes a level of courage that only a few special people on this planet possess. So, credit to the penalty takers. All of them stepped up and banged them in. Tony's no look. It gets better every time I watch it. But how did we get to that point? How did we force that situation to happen? What were we like on the ball? Well, join me. So I'll give Southgate his credit, because in these build-up stages, it was impressive from England, and they used the Switzerland's high press that they've perfected throughout the tournament, that they've caused teams like Germany and Italy real problems implementing, and worked against it, and they didn't really affect England in these areas. And the way they did that was this little guy over here, Jordan Pickford, coming up to basically form that back four that outnumbered the Switzerland press, left that front three with always an extra man to have to deal with. It meant that Freuler or Xhaka couldn't really come and jump to mark him, because they would leave either Rice or Mainu free. So there was always a numerical advantage for England, and as a result it left Pickford dwelling on the ball a bit more, and he's got a nice short to mid passing range. He was finding balls out into the left back, into where Konza was, or he was fizzing it through the line to Bellingham. And I have to say, Bellingham as well, if there was a threat that he was getting pressured and he was getting closed down and the midfield was starting to squeeze him a little bit over to one side, Bellingham would drop in a little bit more just to offer an extra passing lane and outnumber the midfield. The defensive line would outnumber the pressing line, and Bellingham would outnumber the midfield line. Now, I'm not always okay with Bellingham dropping in to receive the ball, because it just comes into a bit of an issue I have with him, which is that he isn't positionally rigid. But I'm also not against it. I feel like I can go both ways on it. And also feel like I can accept him coming deep and staying up. But it worked, and I feel like in these original stages of build-up, we really got the better of Switzerland, and I felt like this was really well implemented by Gareth Southgate and the England team. Did it get better from that point on? No, it did not. It did not, as I'll demonstrate when I push this team forward. Now, when England would build up, they'd do it in their sort of 3-2-4-1 shape, 3-2-5, however you want to say it. And so this is where the issues really started. One was, now when you see it's a 3-2 and the Swiss are defending in a 5-4-1, that they're comfortable defending in wider circumstances. They're comfortable stretching that team out horizontally and cover as much width as possible. And all the players within that shape are very responsible in terms of the positions they take up and the distances they leave between players on the opposition and on their own team. So that lack of width in the backline really hampered England's build-up, which they did try and rectify at points, nowhere near as often, by dropping Declan Rice into the back four to spread him around a bit more, and they could play around the shape. Mainu was that link between defence and midfield. And Mainu, I thought, was really good again. That it gets better every time he plays, this lad. Just so good taking it on the half turn, playing it through the lines, that level of composure which you need in any real circumstance, really. I mean, there was one point he took it on the half turn and pretty much took Switzerland's entire midfield right out of the game. He's so impressive. And you get the best out of Rice in this position, because when he's got a player that's free and unmarked, he releases it so much quicker. And he's not holding on to the ball a bit too much. And when he's in this position, and this just goes for me between this entire back five, or not, I'm not going to include Mainu in that, to be fair, between the back three and Rice, because Mainu, as I'll cover in a bit, was sort of a hybrid between dropping in deep into this area and moving forward with Foden and Bellingham and rotating with them and offering a level of fluidity. But this back four, the way they move the ball is painful. So let's just say Walker in this position here, he'll telegraph his pass wherever it's going to. It gives the Switzerland players time to react and close the space. Let's say if he's opening his body up as if he's going to pass it into Mainu. Vargas and Xhaka quickly squeeze up. Again, if it's into Foden, Freuler will come across. He doesn't release it quick enough. They've covered round. They've restricted the space. Abishir will get too tight to Saka, so that's not on. So he's forced to go back to Stones. He's forced to go back to Konza, and they're trying to recycle it around the other side. You could put together a compilation of England doing that throughout this tournament, and it would probably last somehow more than the accumulated times they've actually played in games. Now, I'm not going to go too critical on Declan Rice, because I feel like I've been critical about him on my time throughout this channel, but I can't have him as this single pivot anymore in that link between defence and midfield where you've got to start playing it through the lines. He is horrifically bad in possession in this role. As I said before, he's decent when he's dropping into the defensive line and he can progress from there, but he is so Tory with the way he is just not giving. Like, first of all, he takes far too many touches before even thinking about where he's going to release the ball. He is a 6-touch minimum person, and he's so afraid of giving it into anyone that's marked. So let's just say if the midfield is a little bit narrow here, but there's a gap into a Foden, into a Mainu, into a Bellingham. Those sort of difficult passes to just thread it through the line, fizz it in a bit, and he's got to be able to take it on the half turn and play. He doesn't do it. Let's just say even if Trippier was to show a bit here and Ndoye was following him, that would never go into Trippier. He's so afraid of giving it to anyone that's in any threat of having a player near him. It's so painful. I don't want to go too hard on Rice because he wasn't the only one guilty of this, but Jesus Christ alive, it is hard to watch sometimes. And as a result, I think that frustration then exudes through the rest of the team as you get Mainu dropping off a little bit more. You get Foden and Bellingham trying to drop behind that midfield line to receive the ball in these deeper areas. And look, you've got Bellingham who can drive at players and cause issues, which he did. He did fantastically, the way he would take it through players and round players. His decision-making was a little questionable throughout the game, but he was probing, he was attacking, he was posing a threat. And I felt like Trippier and Saka did a really good job of maintaining width. I feel like people get it a bit wrong with Trippier, and I've been guilty of this as well. I don't think his issue's been necessarily maintaining width in the tournament so far. It's just when he gets the ball, he doesn't penetrate with it. He doesn't get down the byline and cross in from those areas that Luke Shaw will do and did when he came on the pitch. But he did a good job of maintaining width, and you can't fault Trippier's performance. I think he's done the best he possibly can in the situation that he's in. But it's just clear that he isn't. But it's just clear that he isn't a left back. But you'll see Bellingham, you'll see Foden coming deeper to get on the ball because of that frustration. And I think with the rotation that Southgate wanted with this 4 in between the line, it was almost as if he was trying to Germanify the team. Like with Germany, where it's Musiala, where it's Wirtz, where it's Gundogan, where it's Havertz, you'll see a ton of vertical movements, penetrating, coming deep to really disrupt that opponent's shape. And in Havertz, as much as Havertz has had I'd say, relatively poor tournament, he will make constant movements to stretch that back line and selfless movements as well, where he's not going to receive the ball, but he's opening space for one of these 3 up. Kane won't do that. Kane will stick to his man and he'll look to physically combat with him, or he'll drop deep to get on the ball here, which he did a number of times to spray it wide to Saka or try and penetrate through the opposite flank. He will not worry in behind, and as a result, it meant that when Switzerland got into this phase, they could sit back, they could sit deep and restrict the space in between the line. Because there was no threat of anyone in behind, is you'd leave this guy free, Bukayo Saka, for the quick switch of play over to that side where he could get one-on-one with Abishir, attack him. He was doing well with being doubled up on as well, with Vargas coming over or Rodriguez covering round. And he was excellent all throughout, one-on-one, getting crosses into the area, which deserved better runs from the players around him to get into. Kane didn't do enough, but there wasn't any of those bursting runs from Foden or Bellingham either. Trippier coming in at the back post. And so there was a real lack of box presence in that team. And this is where I think there is maybe an argument more than any of us would like to admit. Could Ollie Watkins serve more of a purpose within this setup than Harry Kane could? And while I don't think Watkins is anywhere close to being as good a player as Kane is he more suited? Look, I wouldn't want to make that decision. But it's a question that needs to be asked, because Watkins will offer that movement. He will work defenders. He will operate in behind and try and get on the end of things and cause that backline issues that maybe give space to Mainu, to Foden, to Rice. And as a result, when you'd see isolation the way it was, let's say if it was Foden that was just left between the lines, because sometimes you just get Bellingham dropping in, Mainu would come naturally deeper to receive the ball and try and progress it because we did lack that. So in these positions, it meant that Ricardo Rodriguez could just jump up and follow Phil Foden and potentially just do a man-marking job on him. And it meant that Switzerland could operate in a back four without really giving away any space in any position. And Rodriguez could just follow Foden if he tried to get on the ball and create, or if they tried to find him. So it was really easy for Switzerland to combat. But they did make attacking substitutions, England. It did result in Saka getting a bit more space to cut inside on his left foot and score a good goal. But such a real lack of just quality. Like, there are some things I think Southgate deserves credit for, there's some things he doesn't. With the way we play from the back and the defence in the midfield, that isn't a Southgate thing. We are just not built as a nation to build up from the back in the way that the likes of Spain do, in the way that the likes of Germany do. We don't have players that can technically shift the ball from back to front and release it quicker and trust players to take it when they're marked. We're just not technically up to the level, but I feel like with this framework, and I don't mind the framework, I can see what he's trying to do, but he's square pegging round holes. I think his biggest issue so far, Southgate, has not been his... I actually think tactically he's been fine, and people may disagree with that, and that's fine. But his biggest issues for me are his substitutes and his team selection, and that's what's costing him dearly, because relying on too many players that aren't fit for purpose in the roles they're trying to play, and the balance isn't there. But they still got through and were in a semi-final against a Dutch team that haven't exactly looked impressive themselves. Going to go over the defensive shape now. So England's pressing was good for all of about 5 minutes. After that, it fell off completely. And as you can see by what I've put together here, this was the intention. It was man-marking. They were pushing and pressing them high and preventing them from getting on the ball. Kane onto Akanji, with Foden and Bellingham covering around onto the wide centre-backs. Mainu pushed onto Xhaka. Rice on Freuler. Abishir would obviously come inside as he's been doing all tournament and inverting into this left side. Saka would do a really good job of following him in, and the back three would go man-to-man and Trippier on and Doy on the far side. Where this fell apart so quickly was this. Kane went from pressing on Akanji to sitting on Xhaka, and as a result, this left Foden in a no-win situation. Does he go to Akanji, who's got a team-splitting pass on him? That's a dangerous play to leave on the ball. Or does he stay on Rodriguez, who can overlap on that left-hand side and create problems himself? And he was consistently caught in between players. And the issue that this raised is if he would make this jump to Akanji, then Saka would come around and attempt to gamble on Rodriguez if it got played out into this side. This meant that Mainu was forced to cover around it, and Mainu, I felt bad for him, because once Kane dropped in and that ripple effect started happening, he got caught in between pressing high, as was his instruction, as you could tell, and coming in deeper alongside Rice. It felt like he needed guidance. It felt like he needed leadership from the players around him, and it just didn't seem he was getting that. And as a result, Switzerland could play through and beat the press fairly easily. It was so sloppy at points. There was this idea that our press was better in the game, and I think the intention was better. And again, this I think isn't something you can necessarily criticise Southgate for, because he clearly wanted man-marking and high pressing from the start. But you've got to rely on your players relaying that message on the field and producing it. Rice did a really good job. I will give Rice this. Within transition defensively, he's maybe one of the best in the world. He stuck to his man-marking job well, Freuler, and if the ball got cleared up this way, he was so alert to anything around him, and that's where he's excellent. That's where he's unbelievable. I have my issues with him technically, but off the ball, in a structure like this, he's fantastic, and he really proved dividends. And I felt like the defenders did a really good job of winning their physical battles. I thought Konza did a really good job on Reader and Embolo when he'd move out into this position. So full credit to him, because it wasn't easy. For a man who's got as little international experience as him to come into this situation, got to give him credit for that. Where it fell apart in the second half, and we did concede a lot more possession second half, was Trippier wasn't really going up to press as much in the second half. Neither was Saka. They would drop back into a back five, which meant it was a lot easier for Switzerland to play out. So Foden was still caught in between players. Abishir had the coverage of this area here, so he could come into the left back position because Saka wasn't pushing up, which meant Mainu had to pull across, and if he wasn't as confident of doing so, that would leave Abishir free. It also then left a clearer passing lane to go into the front areas, and England would allow themselves to get too beaten. And where it fell apart as well, Foden and Bellingham's defensive contribution waned as the game went on. They wouldn't be as intense in the press. It was easier for the wide centre-backs to get on the ball and progress and play around them. And they really struggled as the game went on. They're not defensively minded, especially Bellingham. He really struggles, I feel like, doing that over a consistent period of a game. And then when England got forced back, which they did a lot, and especially in the second half, they'd get pushed back into a 5-4-1 that could turn into a sort of 4-4-2 as Foden or Bellingham would press on either side, and the wing back on that side would then push up to try and follow with that press and jump to press the marker that was left. And again, where this fell apart in the second half especially was Foden and Bellingham getting caught too high up alongside Kane, and it meant that they could play through easily. You'd get the right back dropping in a little bit more, whether it was Ndoye or whatever substitutions they made at that time. You'd get Xhaka dropping in a little bit more as Freuler would offer in between the lines, and it meant they played with a wider back four that they could play around England's shape a lot easier and get it into more advanced areas, which was helped by Bellingham and Foden not dropping into position quick enough, which left this entire half space area free. Also, when the ball got into these positions, let's just say if it's Ndoye on the ball here, Freuler and Abishir, who are typically marked by Mainu and Rice, would get pulled apart far too easily, and as a result it left clear passes into the likes of Mbolo or to Reader or to whoever found themselves centrally, and they could get it in from there. And they were just allowing themselves to be so carved open, England, through silly little individual errors, while remaining so deep, because when you give away space and you're that deep, you're asking for trouble, because where are they going to go when you give that space away? It's not as if they have a whole pitch to gallop into. They're going to be in the box. They're going to be in the right position to create chances, and that's exactly what happened for the Swiss goal, which gave them the lead. So we're just not reliable enough when it comes to these deeper defending areas. We don't have, I don't think we have attacking players that can defend this low block so easily. Bellingham has a tendency to leave space in between himself and his centre midfielder, even if he does drop back into position. And he's done it for Madrid all season. This isn't an England issue. Phil Foden the same. He's a little better at it than Jude Bellingham, but it still was not good enough and really poor. And we just drop in so easily. Again, it's just this feels like such an English DNA thing. We concede pressure too easily. We don't maintain a press, and we let ourselves be forced back. It's just not good enough. But we still got through. There's still plenty of issues within this team and within us tactically, and the substitutions have got to come quicker. I will not let go at that point. But we're through, and we're in the semis. We're 2 games away from something special. It's coming home, lads. It's coming home. In a bit.